Passov and his master walked casually through the center of an old western town and studied the world around them. But as they did, a fight broke out at a nearby saloon and soon spilled out into the street. Usually this would have been ignored, as fights like this were common in Western-style towns. But this particular fight quickly went sideways when a woman, who the two men had been fighting over, stepped into the street to break up the fight. As she did, one of the men pushed her to the ground, drew his pistol, and pointed it at her. "You stay out of this, little missy," protested the gunman. Upon seeing this, Passov, who had, up until now, ignored the fight, sprang into action without his master's orders. Quickly changing into a Western-style gunslinger's outfit, he rushed over and put himself between the woman and the gunslinger. "Hey there, partner, you shouldn't point your pea-shooter at a woman. That's ungentlemanly of you," protested Passov. The gunman, upon seeing this, glared at the dog. "You stay out of this, you dirty mutt," he shouted. Despite this threat, Passov continued to glare at the man. "Stop pointing your pistol at the woman," he said sternly. The gunslinger grinned slyly at him from beneath his sizable mustache. "And what you gonna do if I don't, puppy dog?" he replied tauntingly. Passov merely grinned and then pulled out an assault rifle. "I'll just have to raise the stakes," he replied slyly. The gunslinger looked at this in bemused incredulity and then chuckled slightly. "Ah, so it's gonna be that way, is it?" he replied. He then put his pistol away, summoned a shotgun, and pointed it at Passov. "Now what you gonna do, puppy?" he said mockingly. Seeing this, Passov immediately put away his rifle and brought out a 40mm grenade launcher. The gunslinger grinned darkly. He was enjoying this. He then called up an RPG. Passov matched this by next summoning an 80mm recoilless rifle. The gunslinger answered that with a 120mm shoulder rocket. Passov, in turn, responded by summoning a tank. The gunslinger grinned even wider. This was getting good. To up his game this time, he summoned twin-barrel 5-inch naval deck guns. Not to be outdone, Passov responded by calling up a pair of 8-inch main turrets. The gunslinger answered with a pair of 16-inch main turrets. Passov then responded to this with an entire ship full of 16-inch turrets. The gunslinger, in turn, replied with an entire supercarrier. Passov, not to be outdone, answered that with a nuclear bomb. This, however, the gunslinger didn't answer. Whoa there, partner. Let's not get hasty. That's a little bit too much firepower you're sporting there," he replied anxiously. Passov furrowed his brow at this as he glanced up at the supercarrier that was sitting behind the gunslinger. He then grinned and put away the nuclear weapon, replacing it instead with a Chaos-class Red Dragon. The gunslinger furrowed his brow at this. "Is this more to your liking?" asked Passov. The gunslinger shook his head. "No, it's not. It's still too much overkill," he replied. "That's a fine thing to say coming from a guy who just summoned an entire aircraft carrier," muttered Passov's owner. Passov furrowed his brow at the gunslinger's last statement, given that such a thing had been said in the midst of all the overkill that had already transpired. Deciding that he was done with this ongoing escalation of arms, he raised his right hand and snapped his paws. The gunslinger looked at him curiously, and then up at the dragon as it bent down towards him, its mouth wide open. Suddenly the dragon slammed its mouth closed around the gunslinger, tilted its head back, and swallowed him whole in one gigantic gulp. It then righted itself as it casually licked its lips in enjoyment at its latest meal. Passov grinned at this. A moment later, an all-too familiar voice echoed from deep within the dragon's belly. "All right, partner, you win," said the gunslinger. Passov then looked at the others who were gathered there, winked playfully, and gave a thumbs up as he smiled proudly. However, before he could do anything else, the sheriff of the town, who had seen everything go down, looked at the incredible danger dog himself before gesturing at all of the weapons and oversized hardware that now lay scattered all across the town. "We thank you for saving our city, but who's going to clean up this mess now?" Passov looked around briefly at all the massive weapons and vessels, some of which had flattened a few of the nearby buildings, and then back at the sheriff. He tipped his hat as he winked an eye and said, "Not me, partner." He then jumped onto a horse, grabbed his master, and rode off into the sunset.